Hey everybody, welcome back to the basement. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're checking out a really unique locomotive, probably one of the most unique locomotives I have on my layout. It's all brass and it is pretty funky looking. So let's check it out right here on Chris's Trains and Things. So what are we looking at here? Well, this is a brass Berkshire locomotive in the Southern Pacific paint scheme with this really unique oil tender on the back. Now, this might look kind of familiar because you think Berkshire, Southern Pacific might not all go together, especially with that really weird looking front smoke box. And that's because this has the coffin feed water heater on the front, and it might look reminiscent of the Boston and Maine Berkshires because it was built for the Boston and Maine. In fact, these were built towards the end of World War II. Southern Pacific assumed or had to make the guess that World War II was going to go for a few more years because of regulations on building steam locomotives. They purchased 9 or so of these that were built by Lima Locomotive Works, and they were excess that were built for the Boston and Maine. So they got picked up by the Southern Pacific. So there were only a few of these that made it out to the SP, and they were eventually converted from coal to oil burning. And so we've got this really interesting wheelback tender on this thing. And I found this from trains.com, that's trains with a Z, and I couldn't pass it up. So I had them send it out to me. We're running it around the layout. It is the first brass locomotive that I've had on my layout, other than some brass hybrids from Lionel. The first third row engine that has TMCC on board. Now this was built in the earlier 2000s, so it's a fairly old, almost 20-year-old locomotive. And when you have a brass engine that's changed hands, sometimes things break. And Trains is pretty good about being pretty straightforward with what's broken on an engine. And if it's broken and they didn't know about it, you can send it back and they'll fix it for you. And so this does have some damage to it. We're going to go over that today. But the thing is, when these things change hands, that type of damage sometimes is very incidental. Sometimes it happens in shipping. We had some damage that took place just from FedEx getting it to my doorstep from Georgia, which was unfortunate. Train stands up behind all that. They said, send it back. We'll get it fixed for you. So we're going to check this thing out. It might be back at Trains for sale, or I might keep it for myself. Whenever I get one of these things to run, it's really hard for me to send them back, especially something that is this unique. But it does have some pieces that are just, the detailing is just something you don't see on any other model maker because they are much more expensive than a Lionel or MTHC mentioned. They take a lot longer to build, and they are brass construction, so you have some exceptional add-on detailing. So that's enough of me talking. Let's get a closer look of the details on this engine, and then go to trains.com and search for third row. You can actually go to a specific page on trains.com that just says brass and look at anything that they have that's brass for sale. And if you do that, go to trains.com/CT8T, and that supports my channel. Or if you're checking out, you want to save yourself a couple bucks, use code CT8T in the code or promo code section, and that will save you $10 off a purchase of $50 or more. And you can always plug that code in if you've used it before, and maybe it'll magically work again. You never know. So my, oh my, does this thing have some detailing. So the thing that really stands out is this coffin feed water heater. Now what this is for is it's basically a temperature transfer. So cold water is pumped out of the tender into the feed water heater. It is exposed to the exhaust steam coming out the stack, and by doing so, it heats this water up before it's sent back into the boiler. Now, there are different types of feed water heaters. We've got the external type or closed type like the coffin. We also have some other ones that sometimes are down below the smoke box, and they look like a tank almost. Now, these were built to actually be inside the smoke box, but they do protrude out, which is why they have that unique shape, and they are called coffin feed water heaters. There were also open feed water heaters. I believe Westinghouse provided some of those. They didn't last all that long. The closed feed water heaters were much more popular and used on these Lima built units. Moving down the side of the locomotive here, we've got some legible Lima builders plates here on the side. We've got all this add-on detailing here. Again, this is a brass construction, so we don't have a whole lot of molded in detailing. You'll see some lines on the boiler there that are molded in, but everything else for the most part is going to be an add-on detail. Even from the sand tubing coming out of the sand dome there, we've got all this nice piping detail. We've got a step that's added in here. And then we come down to the drive gear, and the drive gear on this thing is really, really neat. I love the detailing here on the linkages. And then we've just got some awesome detailing here on these side rods and then the drivers. Now, this is a Berkshire, so it is a 284 locomotive. And so you've got your 2 wheels up front, your 8 drive wheels, and your 2 wheels on the trailing truck. If we swing back this way towards the smoke box, we'll see some other amazing, just these brass add-on detail parts are really phenomenal. And then we come down here, and here's one of our damaged parts from shipping. So we've got some brass piping here, and then you can see where it's missing some paint, and then it just is bent a little bit. Now this could probably be bent back and repainted black, and you wouldn't even be able to tell. This would be a great candidate for some weathering. If I were to keep it, because of some of this damage, I would probably weather it, but I would first go back and try to fix some of these piping details and exactly kind of where they're supposed to be. This is supposed to kind of hang just underneath the cab there, so it's not terrible. We could probably get that fixed. Back up here towards the middle, we've got a drop plate, which is a nice touch. We do have a tether to wire in, as I believe electronics are in the tender on these things, as well as the antenna and speaker. And that pretty much wraps that up. Let's go ahead and listen to some of the sounds here before we check out more of the front of the locomotive. So again, not the best sounds we've ever heard in a steam engine, but it is 20 years old. So we get what we get with TMCC. Next, we come back to the tender. Now, this is considered a whaleback tender, and they are not all that common, especially on standard gauge railway. These were found more on narrow gauge railroads. But the interesting thing about these is basically what you have is the front third of the tender here was for the oil, and the back 2/3 is where the water was kept. And then there was a wood plank along the top for people to service the engine or the tender itself. And then there were hatches along the top as well. And on this one, we can flip those open as well. So that could be filled up. We do have operating marker lights on the front and rear of this locomotive. We also have a light here on the back of the tender and some number boards as well, which is a nice. One of the other interesting features of the whaleback tender is the fact that because it is sloped down, it provided much better visibility for folks in the cab to look down and behind the tender, behind the engine itself, towards the freight or whatever it was. If it was backing into a space or on the tracks, they had much better visibility. So they were in fact safer. They just weren't used all that often when we look at coal or those more standard tenders or Vanderbilt tenders that we've seen on many other locomotives. I'll be honest, the whaleback tender is one of the selling points for me to try to keep this locomotive in my collection because I don't have anything that looks quite like this. While we're on the back side of this thing, we'll also notice that we have a electrocoupler here on the back of the tender, which is another nice touch with the TMCC. Front of the locomotive, you're going to see some unique details. So because of that feed water heater, the headlight is down low. You'll see 3500 number board underneath that headlight and then the bell. So a really interesting, unique look. We've also got some protectors here for some air pumps, it looks like, that are hidden back here. So those also provide a really unique, just silver front end of this locomotive. We've got a small cow catcher and a scale coupler right there on the front. And then we can kind of come up. We've got the marker lights there as well. We've got the number boards up top and then just some more add-on detailing along the roof. If we swing over to the back side here, you'll see the whistle right there next to the stack as well.